Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist. Join me as I seek out the small incremental changes being applied in other industries that we can learn from and that can be applied in healthcare. Can these changes bring immediate value, but also add up to the big improvements and revolution we need in healthcare? Come along with me to explore the possibilities. My innovative guests from around the globe have used small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. And today, as I am each and every month, I'm joined by Dr. Craig Joseph. He is the Chief Medical Officer of Nordic Consulting Partners, and we will be reviewing this past month and news you can use. Craig, thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure as always.
Pretty busy week, busy month. In fact, a pretty significant month. All of the things that we thought were going to happen happened, including some we probably didn't think were going to happen. Certainly in my domain in Washington, D.C., I think there were some surprises there, but we've managed to come through to the other side, and we're obviously trying to roll out these vaccines, but there seems to be a few problems with the vaccine rollout. What have you heard, and what do you think is going on?
Well, apparently we need more. So that's the first thing. And actually before that, we need to know how many we have and where they are, and it needs to be transparent. So I think the main thing that we're seeing is that states are being told they're going to get X number of vaccines on certain weeks or certain days, and then that turns out not to be true. And they've relied on that information in order to schedule and to tell all of their folks who are giving vaccines, hospitals and private groups, what to expect. And when they do that and you don't give them what you said you were going to give them, that's a problem. And so that seems to be
cancellations that people are talking about, which of course is frustrating. But I would say the corollary of that is it would be way worse. And I've certainly seen this where they've got more vaccines than they've got people to actually give them to, and they end up either being stored or worse, actually wasted, because some of these have a very short shelf life, certainly in the case of the super cold version.
Sure, absolutely. But that doesn't seem to be the main problem, right? It certainly, we were worried about it, that there weren't going to be enough people or organization. That it's not great, that's for sure, but that doesn't seem to be the biggest issue. The biggest issue is having to cancel, and after you've already set expectations, and that certainly doesn't raise folks' excitement or make them feel that you're competent at what you're doing, right? And
or confident in the services that are being delivered. But there's good news, absolutely. I thought. I saw that the US had ordered 200 million more doses, so problem solved, right?
Problem solved. Nothing could go wrong. And I don't know why anyone would even question that. Because if you put an order in, Dr. Nick, surely the product will come.
As it did with toilet paper in the early part of the pandemic crisis. You could order all the toilet paper you wanted from Amazon, but that wasn't showing up anytime soon.
And I had ordered some very expensive Purell early on in March, and that also never came. And so your point being that you can order and manufacturers can promise, but sometimes reality hits you in the face, and you have factory problems, or you have transport problems, or there are other issues that arise. You need the ingredients before you can produce the end product, and so there's lots of places where things can fall. It's good that they ordered more, and that's a great sign. And I think it's good that more vaccines will hopefully be on their way to approval and administration.
So we are joking a little bit, but I mean, in fairness, I think what this highlights is it's a huge logistical challenge, not just producing them, but also distributing the cold chain. I saw a whole piece about transporting these super cold vaccines and what that means from a pilot standpoint, and the problems with escaping gases when you have these super cold storage systems. So there's all sorts of safety concerns, getting it out and then matching people to the doses that are available and trying to match that as accurately as possible. A couple of things that I've heard that I think are currently the case, we're looking to sort of ramp up, I think, to get to the point of 1.5 million doses as an output, and I think even more than that. And the other thing I saw that I thought was really interesting is Israeli experience. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen this, but they took an entirely pragmatic approach to this and said, we're just going after this and we're going to be open and transparent, but we're not, absolutely aggressive. This is the list. They went by age mostly, but importantly, they were flexing that when they went to a site. They just said, we're just going to get everybody in the site. And there was even the interesting story of grabbing the pizza delivery guy when they had a spare dose at the end of the day and nobody was waiting. They've even encouraged people to wait just in case. And they went out, found somebody that was delivering pizza and put him in, and they give them their second dose appointment there and then in an app, and it's all scheduled, it's all preset. That feels to me like a more pragmatic approach that has gotten them to, some impressive results and some levels of herd immunity. We ought to be able to do that here.
Well, your point is keep it simple, right? And to some extent, that might not be the most equitable way or the most, research or academic based way. However, your point's well taken in that it gets the job done. And I think certainly we can be here in the U.S. can be thought of as being guilty of saying, well, it's got to be perfect and it's got to be here we have rules, and if one person violates those rules, then it's a big deal, and we need to come down with a hammer. And that pizza delivery thing is, I think, a great point. Sometimes people don't show, and sometimes, as you've already mentioned, once these vaccines are thawed, they must be used within a certain amount of time, or they're wasted. Yep. And so, certainly, it would be wrong if someone purposefully stationed their family outside and didn't schedule the right number of people, but no one's alleging that, right? It's just that, hey, someone didn't show up or the right number of people didn't show up, and we have this and it's going to be wasted in an hour and we're closed. And so, if there's a pizza person, they should get it.
It comes with transparency. I think if you make all of that transparent so that people can see and there's no malintent. And the other thing I would say about equitable distribution, even though my neighbor gets it before me, that's a good thing, because that means he's less likely to get it and then spread it. So the more people that are getting it, the better all round. We don't all have to get it at the same time to derive value, is my sort of attitude to that.
I 100% agree. And, I think what you're maybe seeing with the Israelis is speed matters. And so maybe sometimes down and dirty gets the job done. And instead of trying to, micromanage and say, well, this group of people can get it, and just saying, oh, if you're over 65, just come on. That's all we need. Over 65.
And it's a pretty easy data point to validate because everybody has an ID. It has your date of birth on it. With the exception of my mother-in-law, who protects her age with, huge security implementations. Almost everybody I know, we can determine their age pretty easily.
And I have talked with your mother-in-law. She is 25.
and I've seen would be very grateful to hear that.
I have seen the proof, and I'm a licensed physician, and I have now decided that she is 25. So she should let her know that. So
pragmatic, simple, get her done kind of approach, I think, is really what we need. Plus, obviously, increasing the supply. There's some other things that have shown up that I think are concerning people. The variants, we're talking about lots of different variants at this point. I think they're misnamed or inappropriately named. We deliberately named SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 and not named after the place that it was first identified, because we've seen that with Marburg, Ebola. You essentially stigmatize a location. Now here we are, we're stigmatizing a variant by saying the UK. Oh my God, it's the UK variant. But put that to one side for a second.
I can't, because I've always thought that bad things come from the UK, and I can't put that aside, Dr. Nick. I feel like that's accurate and fair. Everything else you said is right, but we should blame the UK for this variant that, you're right, might not have actually originated in the UK. It's here. It's really your fault, as I understand it, and by you, I mean the country that you were born into. The UK apparently is doing a much, much, much better job of looking for variants and recording them and trying to understand them and if they have any clinical significance. Much better, like significantly better than everyone else, including the US. And so that's why I guess when you do look for something, your chances of finding it are much higher.
Right. I think you bring up an important point about these variants. The idea that so the UK, and then the other one that's causing some consternation is the one that's termed South African variant. They are likely to be present in the pool of infections that we've seen. We've certainly seen that based on the tracing back, going back to the origins of this disease. It was present far before we actually thought or were detecting it because we weren't looking for it. We didn't have tests for it. And we in the US do not have a good genomic surveillance program for COVID-19, or at least not that I'm aware of. There are certain spots where they do have it, but not many, right?
Yeah, and I would agree with you if I knew what genomic surveillance was, although I think I do know what it is, but maybe you want to explain it, why. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, to kind of understand why we want to look at all of these variants or mutations or whatever you want to call them. So why don't I kind of bow to you and allow you to explain that?
Well, so viruses mutate. They don't have a spell checker built in. Well, some of them do, but the spell checker doesn't work perfectly. And in fact, in the case of coronaviruses, their mutations or their typing capabilities are very similar to mine. I'm a terrible typist. I'm not a touch typist. I have a tendency to look at my fingers and make all sorts of mistakes. Thankfully, there are correction mechanisms that get me correct. In the case of coronavirus, very like me, there's more mistakes for a variety of reasons. And those mistakes mostly just sort of disappear into all the variations that occur but don't matter because nothing really happens to them. Or in fact, they cause such a problem for the virus that strand or thread dies out. But in the case of these variants that we've seen, they've changed some specific elements within the virus that allows it to bind quicker. So it seems we certainly believe that it's more effective in the case of the UK variant. And in the case of the South African variant, it's actually more virulent to the extent that it causes or reduces the effectiveness of the vaccine-induced response by about a factor of 6, which, sounds like a lot, but relatively speaking, the vaccines that we have, the messenger RNA vaccines that have been produce a very high level of response. So we've still got space to allow for that drop. And this is part of the natural innovation of viruses. They're constantly changing, partly to survive, partly it's the nature of the mechanisms that they're made up of. And we keep seeing them. Some die, some reappear. These ones are showing up. They're obviously things to watch, but my view, not a major concern at this point. It's just something we've got to focus on and keep doing all of the things that we're doing.
I agree 100%. And it's really is evolution, right? These random changes happen, as you say, and the vast majority of time, they're either inconsequential or bad in terms of the virus. And every now and then, something happens that makes it a little bit better at infecting us and reproducing. And those are the things, like you say, we're skating by, but the longer this goes on, the more mutations will occur.
Right.
And, I read, I think yesterday that the Moderna vaccine, Moderna is looking to tweak some of the components of their vaccine just in case. So not to say that they need to do that immediately, but starting the work to say, well, we're assuming that this one variant does become the variant, the most common way of the most common, view of the virus that we see. We'll be ready with as we produce more vaccine.
So for those of you just listening, I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and today I'm talking to Dr. Craig Joseph. He is the Chief Medical Officer at Nordic Consulting Partners. We were just talking about the variants, and as Craig rightly said, there was some tweaking going on of the RNA-based vaccinations. And that's one of the positives out of that, is that that's possible. It's not possible with some of the other vaccine platforms to be able to go, oh, we're just going to tweak this. It's just the nature of the way, if you look back in time to when that vaccine was first developed, from the point of the genome being published to them having a test subject vaccine was 1 week. That's an incredible piece of science right there. And we can modify that. They've attacking about several specific targets within the virus that are targeted for production of antibodies that are stimulated by the vaccine. And these variants produce slightly different, but the totality of the response, the neutralizing antibody response, is still sufficient. So it is in the abundance of caution that they're thinking about changing it. We may have to be doing that in the future, but I think we're in good shape. Moving on, one of the things that's happening with this vaccine rollout, obviously people are desperate. There's a lot of scams going on, unfortunately, people offering vaccination and saying, hey, for a small fee. We've seen some questionable vaccination systems. I think people have gotten caught out in the rush to, mostly people do good, but there are obviously some bad actors out there. The thing that really strikes me about this is that it's just ripe for problems of abuse of, people that are most vulnerable, those that need the vaccine. That's the elderly. They tend to be more subject of scams and security failures. Any thoughts on how we can try and prevent that? What would you be advising people to do to prevent them from getting caught out?
Yeah, well, I think the general rule, if it seems too good to be true, right, it most likely is. So if someone is advertising that you can beat the lines, no reason to stand in line or wait your turn for $100, I can get you what you need. Likely not the case. In fact, money should really not exchange hands. For anyone that has insurance, it should be free. And my understanding is that some healthcare organizations are charging an administration fee. But again, if you have insurance, that goes to the insurance company and they're required to cover that. So the vast majority of us should not be paying any money, not 1 cent. And so, yeah, if it sounds too good, if it allows you to jump the line or other features that sound like that's really something I wish everyone did, it's probably not real. And it is unfortunate, as you say, elderly tend to be more trusting. And if someone looks like a doctor or acts like a doctor, then they might follow that advice. But I think that, your best bet's to look to your local government, your local health department about where you should be going and what you should be doing.
So I'm going to push back a little on that, where you say that it should be free. And I agree that that's, for the most part, the principle. But I'm going to cite a personal story of testing, which is also supposed to be free. But in the case of a test administered through one of these pop-up clinics, showed up as a $385 fee for a COVID-19 test. And as best as I can tell, nothing was done, incorrectly. There just seems to be either bad actors or something that I'm missing in all of this. Because it should be free. I mean, if you're going to get the population vaccinated and tested, you need to make this widely available. You can't tie it to people's ability to pay for it, because they won't.
No, I agree. And for the people that are listening and cursing both of us now, I think we acknowledge it's not free. It's a no charge. So the person on the receiving end, someone's paying for it, and it's the government, which is all of us with our taxes. And so certainly we acknowledge it costs money. It's just right. If people are going to be charged lots of money to get vaccinated or to get tested, then most likely many of us are going to choose not to do that. So totally agree. One of the scams I had heard of was with respect to testing, not with vaccination, was a physician who thought it would be a great idea, for testing for COVID, maybe we do a respiratory screen. And so testing for 7 or 8 other respiratory viruses. Hey, you have a cough and a cold. Maybe that's COVID. Maybe that's influenza. Maybe that's a rhinovirus. And so doing the, charging your insurance company for that. Well, that's going to cost money. And that is, I don't think, ethical. And that's certainly a scam in my book. And so, those folks are out there and they're looking for money.
And if you find them, report them.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got a few minutes left. There's been talk about masking, maybe updated masks. What are your thoughts?
Well, Dr. Fauci was asked this a couple days ago about should I be wearing 2 masks now? And his answer was, it probably won't hurt. And I think that's right. It probably won't hurt. And again, the idea being, hey, if everyone could have a well-fitted N95 professional healthcare mask and wear it whenever they're around anyone else, that would be awesome. So let's first say that would be great. Now we know that you can't just go out and buy those, and we do need to reserve those for people who are healthcare workers and to the best that we can. And then B, again, those need to be well fitted for those to actually work to 95%, where they reduce 95% of the particles going through. And so that's also not very straightforward. The idea with the cloth masks or with masks that are not professional grade is that they block some of the virus. And I think that's a common misperception about how these are supposed to work. I know when I first heard about wearing a mask, a cloth mask that you could buy from Etsy, I was like, what's that going to do? That's not going to keep out everything. And so, and the idea was, at least in my mind, hey, if one virus particle gets through, that's it, game over. What's the difference between one and a million? And the answer with this particular virus is a lot. There's a lot different. And so one theory, although not proven, is that the severity of the illness may be related to the number of particles the number of virus particles that you're getting exposed to or getting into your lungs, and how far down your respiratory system they go. And so anything you can do to decrease that number helps protect you. And so the idea is, well, if you have one cloth mask and it, at best, it sounds like can stop maybe 50%, adding another cloth mask, that takes you to 75% reduction. And that's pretty good if it's well-fitting and you have 2. Now, I saw a physician, I don't recall his name, who said, that's all well and good if you're going to put 2 masks on and you're going to be uncomfortable and they're not going to fit right and you're going to fidget with them, then it's not helpful. And you should only wear one. You need one that the best one that you can get if you're not going to be comfortable in it. And I think that's it really comes down to common sense. If I'm forced to be in a small enclosed place with other people, that's really my nightmare right now. But if I were forced to do that for whatever reason, I think that makes sense to do everything you can for that short amount of time, if it is short, to consider putting on 2 cloth masks. I think that makes complete sense to me. Wearing it all the time, I don't know. I'm not sure the benefit's there.
So I actually think it's not 2 cloth masks. I think the ideal or the optimum of the 2 mask strategy is cloth mask with a surgical style mask on the outside that approaches the sort of N95. But I think your principles are entirely correct. What's practical and applying it when it makes sense. I have an N95 from when I was, actually allowed to do testing before they said you had to have a medical license to be able to do the testing in our state. And I reuse that when I feel there's an appropriate purpose for that. So, I think the same instance, but you're exactly right. If you can't wear one mask, you're not going to wear 2, and you're definitely not going to wear an N95, because if you've ever put one of those on properly and had it fit tested, including the smoke test, that's bloody uncomfortable.
Right. And I think that's one of the main things people don't understand about a fit test. In the hospital, pre-pandemic, when people had to deal with patients who had TB or something like that. Yeah, you had to go and have these tests to make sure that you couldn't get exposed. And it was serious.
It was uncomfortable. Yeah. Unfortunately, as usual, we've run out of time. So just remains for me to thank you for joining me today. Craig, it's always a pleasure. Until next month. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. Do you have any better ideas, or have you found a small incremental change that's brought about a big improvement in your world? Let's continue the conversation on our hashtag, The Incrementalist, or share with me at DrNick1 on Twitter. You can find more information about the show on our program page at healthcarenowradio.com, and tune in next time to hear my discussions with leaders and innovators from around the globe who've revolutionized their space by using small incremental improvements to achieve their moonshot. I'm Dr. Nick, the Incrementalist, and I'm starting a revolution through evolution.